Okay, I'm just going to go with it. I've had a nightmare with all the streaming software and shit, so apologies if you jumped in and have left, or jumped in and saw that I wasn't streaming at the time I was supposed to be streaming, because I'm well late, and I hate being late. It's one of the main things that I actually stresses me out, which is a good segue really into what I want to talk about today. Recorded live, another Magento dev. Hello, recorded live on a Friday, as I always do. People jump in and out of these streams. A lot of people watch them in retrospect, which I thank you all for. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're tuning in at any point, that is good for me and good for this channel, and hopefully good for you in terms of just getting you to think, or listening to someone talk about something that you love. And in this circumstance, it is Magento, because that's what I love, and web development and development in general. It's all the sort of stuff that I'm into. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today is, well, generally it's productivity is the first thing I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about PHP upgrades for Magento 2. It's not a PHP upgrade for Magento 2. I know that's a daft thing to say, but in a month, so 28th of November, so I'm recording this on the 21st of October 2022. On the 28th of November 2022, PHP 7.4 will go out of support for security updates. So what does that mean? Does it mean everyone's Magento site is going to come crashing down to earth? Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that. But what it will mean is that to keep your Magento site in good conscience and to keep it as secure as it possibly can be, you've got to go to PHP 8 at least. Magento 2.4.5 is currently compatible with 8.1, so if you can go to 8.1. I am going to do a little bit of fiddling about it later on, so I'm going to get into the code in a few minutes. And just show you how I would approach switching PHP versions and testing it locally. So hopefully that'll be useful for beginners. So I'm going to get into that in a second. But talking about switching and switching PHP versions and testing, it also is sort of leading me into what I want to talk about, which is a little bit of a, whatever you want to call it, a rant, a monologue, just my thoughts on something with regards to productivity, and it's context switching. Now, context switching is something that I think gets overlooked massively with regards to people who do complicated jobs. I wouldn't say just developers, I would say anyone really, any human being that needs to context switch in their job constantly, in my opinion, is going to be less productive at their job. You know, how many times do you sort of do you sort of feel as if stress levels are going up because you're Slack's constantly clicking, emails are constantly beeping, text messages, whatever it is, and these little interruptions are essentially stopping your processor, which is your brain, from concentrating on what it was concentrating on. You know, you may have been in executive focus and you're really into something, and then and you're like, fuck, I don't even know what it's about, but it's distracted me, right? And that essentially is a form of context switching, because suddenly you're concentrating on something else, right? Context switching in sort of from a developer's perspective, what I would say the main problem is, because obviously you can switch off Slack and you can switch off emails, you can do all that sort of stuff, and you can go into your little bubble, your little silo, your booth in your mind, and you can concentrate on something for a number of hours, right? And I would prefer to concentrate on something, a task, for 4 hours minimum. And I think that's probably, like, just over my years of experience, the minimum that you really should be booked onto a task. You know, if we're talking about agency work now, so I've developed it from, being, because obviously there's a balance to be struck, isn't there? What a developer wants to work on, and for the amount of time they want to work on it and they think they should be work on it, versus what a business says you have got allocated to work on it. So there's a compromise there, isn't there? Because you've got to, it's a team, it's a collaborative process working in an agency as a developer. It's a collaborative process whether you're working as a freelancer for a developer. And obviously, even if you're a freelance developer and you're not subservient to timescales in terms of agency timescales of you have X amount of time in hours to do a task, you are still conscious of how much time you're spending on a job, because that's what your income is based on as well. So it does work for both, and I've done both, so I'm sort of, I think I'm informed enough to talk about it at least. So when I talk about these 4 hours, and when I'm talking about these 4 hours, I'm sort of saying, like, ideally you get 4 hours. Now in my job, I don't get 4 hours. I feel I don't get 4 hours solid to do anything, because what does 4 hours look like nowadays? Like, what does it actually look like? So say for example you clock on at 9 o'clock. 4 hours is going to take you what? It's going to take you to 1 o'clock. Now, is it realistic to say that you have got 4 hours, you're going to have your head down or head in the code for 4 hours solid without lifting your head up, without taking a break, without going for a piss, without needing a drink, without getting hungry, without something happening within your body to distract you, right? It's almost impossible to say that. And I haven't even talked about when you have your mobile phone on your desk, or you have Slack open, or all these other distractions, external distractions. I would say that 4 hours is a difficult thing to just, for your own physiology not to distract you, right? To get into that. So when I'm talking about 4 hours, I'm talking about within that, realistically, what you're doing. An hour and a half's executive focus on the task. So what we're talking about there in terms of context switching and processing is you're giving yourself a buffer. So when you say to someone, yeah, I need 4 hours for that Magento upgrade, I need 4 hours to look at that problem, you're not saying you're going to bill 4 hours. As the developer, you're not saying you're going to bill 4 hours to a client. You're sort of giving your best estimation of 4 hours. It's going to take me 4 hours to turn this, to do this job, basically. I need this space to be able to condense down the actual work I'm going to be doing within those 4 hours into productive work and hopefully complete that task. Right, and everybody's going to be different. I'm quite easily distracted. So but the problem there is that 4 hours is being taken sort of literally by the person then billing that work. Again, if I'm talking about agency work, that person's going to go bill that work maybe to a client. Obviously, I could start talking about how much time you log versus how much time actually goes to the client, which there is a discrepancy there, because we do, we're not sort of, dick taping agencies just out there to squeeze as much out of the client as possible. If I do know that it's only taking me 2 hours to do something within the 4 hour window I've quoted, I will only log the 2 hours, and I'll probably log all the Slack conversations I had to have with regards to handovers, or anything that I did get distracted on within those 4 hours. I'm going to be stopping my clock, essentially, and I am quite diligent about that. I pride myself in that I'm quite realistic about the discrepancy between the time that I say something's going to take me versus the time it actually takes me. And I think obviously we should all do that, because that that does protect us as developers as well, because there is occasions where we go over as well, where we say 4 hours and it takes us a day because we just underestimated it. And it works both ways then. And if you have that relationship with whether it's direct to your client or your account manager or your project manager or your managers, then you're in a better position there for negotiation of why did it take you so much longer? Why did because a quote is just it's a shot in the dark. Let's face it. I mean, obviously, quoting accuracy, I would say, is based on experience, isn't it? Like, the closer you get to an accurate quote is based off the amount of experience you've got in terms of how many times have you done that before and all that. So it's not an exact science for every individual. So in terms of those 4 hours and context switching, now to bring it back to context switching, like, one of the worst things is having those 4 hours and then working on something, and then suddenly your phone's ringing. Like, you might have something switched off, your phone's ringing, and someone's trying to get hold of you because there's a problem somewhere, and you have to actually change your, so you was doing a Magento upgrade and now you're dealing with a 500 error on a Magento site and you're like, how has this happened, right? It's going to take it, apparently, studies have shown that it takes around half an hour for a human being to switch those, for your brain to actually basically go down, and if I put it in sort of computing terms, to switch contexts. So to change your, to put your RAM, pull your RAM away from the last thing it was thinking about, to put in your random access memory into the new thing you're thinking about. Apparently that's half an hour. So there's another half an hour lost. And before you know it, your day's exploded, hasn't it? Your day's gone. Like, the time in that day is gone, because then you're going to start getting, you know, if you're trying to, you're going to start getting tired. You're going to start getting sick of what you're doing. And, you know, there's a window of productivity, of actual energy that you can apply to something, because your brain is taking up a lot of energy. And obviously then you've got to replenish your body, you've got to feed, there's all sorts of things that go in here. So when we're talking about, you know, how many hours a day you need to work and how many hours you're actually productive, when you break it down into all these different things, how much you're distracted, how many other problems come up, how much, you know, so you're quoting in the future based off, yeah, it's going to take me 4 hours to do that on Thursday. You don't know what's going to happen on Thursday, you don't know how you're going to be feeling, you don't know what other problems are going to come up. Yet, personally, because I'm, you know, a head of a department, I'm held to them quotes. And most developers, in their gut, will hold themselves to those quotes. So they've said 4 hours. And I can understand, and I do this, why suddenly you find yourself logging on at 8 o'clock at night when you've clocked off at 5, just to add a couple of extra hours onto your day. And it's not because you're incompetent. You know, that can seem from an external person, well, why didn't you get it done? You had 9 till 5 to do that. Well, as I've just tried to sort of explain in a roundabout way, you really haven't got 9 to 5 to do that. Not when you have all the other things to deal with in your day, particularly as a technical person, as a developer, who's actually got to write solutions in and amongst all of the other admin and communication that you need to undergo and undertake all the way through the day. And with regards to, again, bring it back to context switching, the more you're switching contexts, so the more you're asked to do different jobs within the day, and I'm not even talking about emergencies now. You might have like a 2-hour job here, a 3-hour job here, and a 2-hour job, and that's fitting into your like your day of 8 hours, for example. You know, your schedule says you've got to complete those things. No one's taking into account the half an hour it takes to switch contexts. So that's an hour and a half you've lost that day in terms of productivity of your brain just not being able to switch to the next context. Now, how can you remedy that type of thing? Well, it's very, very difficult, because ideally, right, those 3 jobs should be the same type of work, like 3 Magento upgrades. That'd be easier, because you're not necessarily switching contexts. The actual start of those processes are always the same, aren't they? You know what you're doing once you've done the first one, you run that on the second one. So if and that's a planning issue if that can happen. But the work just doesn't work like that. Like, clients don't conveniently all line up like a queue in a sandwich shop, asking for 3 Magento upgrades in a row. So you will get pulled from pillar to post on, you know, a lot more. And I think one of the main reasons why this has come up for me this week is we are trying to sort of I'm always trying to work out what's best for me and my team in terms of what's the best way to get the best out of the different individuals, and what's the best type of work to send to different individuals. And that is obviously a puzzle that's really difficult to sort of work out. But I often see it as being the opposite, right? For if rather than trying into, because of the nature of the work and because where the actual the workload that we have to balance within our team with all our different clients is so varied, it's hard to sort of say, oh, this developer's really good at these things, so we'll give them all these things, or this developer's really good at these things, so we'll give them all this type of thing on this day. But what I would probably try, rather than doing that, because that's almost impossible, I would try and say, look, whoever's planning the schedule for this developer, and you've got a lot of work for them to do, try and spread it out more to give more time for that to happen. And it might seem less productive, but let me tell you, you'll get your, as a project manager, you'll get feedback from that developer more frequent. You'll basically, they'll surprise you. It'll be like they'll get back to you and say, oh, by the way, that was done. That's been done today. That's been done today. That's been done. I've ticked all these things off, because when the developers looked at their schedule for the day, it looks more manageable. And they're straight on with the first thing. They're allowing themselves the breaks, because they know that they don't have to, plan that ahead in the mind, think, shit, I've got to go out and have my dinner at 1 o'clock because I know that I've got a big job in the afternoon. Like, if they've only got one job that day, and it might only be a 4-hour job, that's going to look like it's going to be less productive. But I think in the long run, it's going to save the loss of time. So seeing it in the opposite, like the more you try and cram in thinking that they're going to get more done, the less they're actually going to do. So I think look at it from that perspective. Are you cramming stuff in here, or can it be spread out? And just make that your rule. Try and spread things out. I'm talking about when I say your rule there is the people who are planning schedules. So I think that's probably the way I'm going with it, in terms of trying to influence people within the business that I work in to try and spread things out. And it's not because we want to sort of sack it off, because most devs, being the engine room of any agency, they are there to be productive. It is built into us. We wouldn't be developers if we didn't like completing things, really getting to the end of stuff and being able to test it. One of the worst things is struggling to get something finished in a short amount of time, which a lot of the time isn't set by yourself, and knowing in your gut that you haven't fully tested it, or you haven't had a chance to test it. So you sort of send it out and go, let them test it for you, because the worst feeling then is it coming back and saying there was X, Y, and Z wrong with it, and it was obvious stuff, but you was just unable to see it. So that's just, I don't know what that was, but it was just a little bit of a sort of a mental offload that I needed to get off my chest. So get off my brain. So thanks for listening to that. I think it's an important thing that we give ourselves time to do our best work. That's all it is. It's like giving yourself a time, and be realistic about your time, and be greedy about the amount of time you need to actually do something, and sort of try and rethink that, I think, going forward. And that leads me into what I'm going to talk about now, and we're going to just jump into the code. I'm just going to context switch here. Right, so I'd just done. I didn't plan to do this, which is regarding. I'm going to talk about PHP and how we can sort of switch and test different PHP versions locally and see how things are affected on our sites. Obviously, prior to doing this on, if they are affected, prior to doing this on sort of our live sites, because in a month, as I said at the beginning of the stream, we're going to be looking at out of security support. PHP 7.4 is going to be out of security support, and we're going to have to move our Magentos, if we have got good conscience, to PHP 8 at least. And as I said, PHP 8.1 would be good too. Now, this is my sort of test version of M24, and the reason I won't gonna do this about PHP 8 because and switching, I was gonna sort of talk about as well upgrading on PHP 8 rather than 7.4, but because I was having a bit of trouble with upgrading a site, and I thought it was down to the fact that something had happened between the last upgrade I did, which was 2.3.5, and now on the 11th of October, 2.4.5, sorry, and now on the 11th of October, 2.4.5 P1's come out, and I was thinking, because I was getting composer errors, and I'm not the best at reading them and understanding them, and I was seeing an error come out, and I'm gonna actually bring it up because it might catch people out this, I'm going to bring it up. I screenshotted it. Because I don't get it again now, because I actually, basically what I'm saying is I got the upgrade through, and what I wanted to do this live stream on was how I would complete that upgrade from the error I was getting, to sort of say, look, there's a process in which I'll go through a process here, and eventually I'll get this upgrade through, and I was going to do it live, but in the end I got it through before the stream started. But that doesn't doesn't change the fact that I was getting this error, and it might help people getting it, or at least basically this here. Now, I'm shit at reading these. People will be better than me at reading these. I'm absolutely shit at this. Now, I was reading this going, shit, there's a problem with PHP 7 here. PHP 7.4. It can't be modified by Composer, which means that this is incompatible with PHP 7. The new, basically, this version, 3.2.0 version of amqplib, which by the way is a PHP extension that Composer uses, Magento uses, to run, I think it's RabbitMQ, right? So the reporting, debugging type of, I don't even know what that does. Like, I don't even know in great detail what RabbitMQ does, or what this certainly does within that. So I was thinking there was some sort of problem now since the 11th of October with upgrading on 7.4. But let me tell you, that is not the case. The problem was that I had, and I can show you in this one, because this one isn't here. Right, I had in, I believe it was this section here, and it wasn't me who put it there. I think it was a developer I used to work with, who remain nameless, but he's a good lad, so I'm not gonna, and he might even be watching this. There was something in my Composer which I'd not, maybe I've come across it before, but maybe I just don't fucking remember these things. But there was basically a sort of a, what would I call it, like a parameter in here, which was saying use 7.4, right, in my Composer file, and I didn't know, right, because what I was doing was I was having a look at, obviously you're on your command line, aren't you, and you're going, what version of PHP am I running? I'm running 7.4. The last upgrade I did for 7.4.5 didn't care that I was upgrading it on 7.4. I was sort of thinking, shit, do I now need PHP 8 to even upgrade a Magento since October? Has whatever P1, because I didn't look into what P1 did specifically in a sense that I knew there was some security upgrades, but I didn't really look into them specifically, and I just haven't had the chance for any of my clients to run that security patch, or even run another upgrade since October the 11th to 2.4.5. I don't know why I can't remember that. So I was sort of thinking, right, well, since we can only upgrade on 8 now, it's not the case. This is what was causing it, right? So basically what I ended up doing was I ended up testing different versions of PHP and trying to upgrade on different versions of PHP, and I'll run some things here, right? So I'm gonna put that in my, I'm almost certain it was that. Let me just check. I can't really show you the repo in any great detail. I'm just going to check whereabouts that was, just to make sure. Yeah, I'm sure it was in config. Yeah, it was, right. So I'm just going to paste this in to make sure I've done it exactly right, because I'm going to try and cause this problem for myself on this. Right. There we go. Okay. So yeah, that was, obviously I've changed that. I was experimenting. Right. And this, trust me, stick with me. These live streams are always a bit of a live stream of consciousness, aren't they, and me rambling on, but hopefully you will take something away from this, particularly if you run into a lot of problems with upgrades and you get all twisted with what PHP version you're running, Composer version. Oh, it's a fucking it's a nightmare, and I'm hoping you can learn from my mistakes. Right, so here we go. Right, so in terms of this here. Now, this is already upgraded to 7.3.5, so I'm not going to be able to run the upgrade on this site in and of itself. But I am I'm just going to run Composer Update, because I don't care if it breaks, to be honest. Right. I'm going to run Composer Update with this here. So, yeah, this is what I was getting. Great. So that's the same error, basically. So I was thinking it was picking up my PHP version from the command line here, because I hate these errors. Like, what are they actually saying? It's saying there's conflicts between 740 and 741, right? But I've checked this repository for this plugin, and it's perfectly compatible. It says it's perfectly compatible with between 7.1 and 7.4, right? Or 7.41 or something. So I was thinking, well, this is bullshit. It should be working, right? And I'm running 7.4.3 here. So why is it even saying that? Surely it should be saying 7.4.3. It's incompatible with 7.0 to 7.41. And it was all because it was getting this information from here. So when you remove it, it works. So, but I'm not going to remove it yet. So what I was trying to do is, and I'm using Valet Linux Plus, right? So I'm able to just switch again between my different PHP versions. And right, I'm going to purposely switch up an extra version here, because I'm going to talk about something. So say for example, I want to upgrade PHP 8.1 and the command line. So notice I've done update CLI here, right? And I want to, and then I try it. So I go Composer Update, right? Watch what happens. Right. So it's already trying to run it on 8.1 now, and this is something that is a pain in the ass, but it's worth going through, because I'm going to show you 8.0 in a minute. This does take a while. So basically, I'm gonna get the error. I'm gonna get is gonna be, you have got, because I will have, for 8.1 you have got a shitload of PHP extensions missing. And basically, it's because when I've installed PHP 8.1 using Valet use, so you go Valet use 8.1 or whatever PHP version you want to install, it'll go to PHP and it'll pull back your version of 8.1 to use. But obviously, it don't pull back every or drag in every PHP package which Magento needs. I have a list of those handily that I sort of keep. And I'll paste them somewhere. Where can I paste them? Right, so there you go. So basically, it's complaining about all these things, right? Which I looked at and I thought, yeah, that's fine. But I'm not getting the error now, right? Here, anywhere that I can see what I was getting before, which was, about AMQ lib and being incompatible with 74741. So I was thinking, great, well, I must need to upgrade things on PHP 8 minimum then, right? So, right, I'm not going to install all these packages on 8.1 because I already have done on 8.0, right? So I'm going to switch to 8.0. And I have installed so there's PHP 8 Common, GMP, Curl is an important one, SOAP, BC Math, Intel, MB String, XMLRPC, all of the stuff that and this is just a bit of my notepad, to be honest. You can see this, but basically all of these here, I've installed them all just as sudo apt on my Linux machine, and mostly will be running Magento on sort of Ubuntu Linux. Probably all here, because I don't think you'd be doing it any other way, right? So let me just check PHP version. Right, so I'm running 8 now, and I'm running 8 on command line. So now I do Composer Update, and you've probably guessed what's going to happen. So now it's running it on 8 with all of these plugins installed. So we're not going to hit these errors, but it was a bit of a red herring. I'm getting this again. So this was really making me scratch my head because I wasn't reading it properly. I was thinking, why the fuck does it think I've still got 7.4? I'm running 8, right? What's going on? And it was purely because this was referenced in here, and it don't even need to be. So you can run Composer Update on PHP 8, right? So you can do it. I might do it in a sec, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can get working. Let me just commit some stuff. Right, I'm just going to commit this. It was an extension I did for the last live stream, and it was with regards to config product pricing. Just confirm that. So let me just check the stream, because we've had a couple of views. Oh, we've got I learned that you can fake PHP versions and stuff in Composer JSON. We'll definitely read more about it. Yeah, it looks. I think what you mean by fake. I think that I'm not sure when that chat came in from somebody whose name I cannot read. Unfortunately, I apologise. But there's one in the chat there. Yeah. Definitely, these things you really have to do your research on it. You really do have to do your research on it, because they proper catch you out. Like, they really do catch you out. So I've got rid of that bit in my Composer JSON there, the platform sort of PHP specification. I've got no words to describe it. Right, but what I am going to do is I'm going to, and this is good practice, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to check out on a new branch from develop. Whenever you're doing anything like messing about with PHP versions, testing things, I would always do it on another branch. It might not affect anything, but you might have to change things, as we've just said, or upgrade things in Composer JSON, and you don't want that necessarily to affect your develop branch, which might be, running other features and things like that. So the way you do that in Git for beginners, if you don't already know, is you -b it, git checkout -b, feature PHP 8. If I'm doing upgrades, I'd do feature M2 whatever, M245, whatever the upgrade is. So I'm going to jump to another branch. Right, so I know I'm sort of safe, and I can mess about as much as I like on here. Right, so I'm just going to double check my PHP version. I'm sure I changed it to 8 just a second ago, didn't I? Yeah, I'm on 8. So I'm going to run the big 4. And the big 4 is setup upgrade, DI compile, static content deploy, and then I just flush cache. And I'm just going to test that this all goes through whilst using PHP 8. Now on this site particularly, I'm pretty confident it's going to be very simple to do, and all I'm going to have to do is deploy it on PHP 8. So first thing I'm going to test is doing it like this, just to make sure I don't get any basic errors with the deployment on PHP 8. Like, I might have some locally installed or locally crafted extensions or something, which I do on this site, to be fair, even though it's a test site. Extensions that I've written, and I can't be trusted to make sure that all my PHP code's going to be compatible with PHP 8. So it's worth just running this first. So I would do this first. I'd switch branches. I would switch PHP in my... This one's always coming up for me on my local, because I run different Magentos. So if you've ever had this is regards to Elasticsearch basically getting full up. And I have got a brilliant website which I always just hit to clear this, and I'm just going to bring it up here. It is MageComp. Shout out to MageComp. This is a God saver. God save it. Could save gods. Could do. It's powerful. It's a lifesaver. And what you do is you run these two commands. So first of all, hit that, which is the first one, which you can sort of see here. That first one I just ran. Then the second one. And this generally happens because I've had Elasticsearch running using the same name, Magento 2, because I use the same one for all of them, all of my local stuff. And it's just always getting sort of mixed up and over it. And so then I'd run indexes. Index or reindex. So essentially this is cleared out Elasticsearch, these two commands, and then you run indexer, and then it all builds back again. And then I'd run the big for. So I'll run the big for again, and it'll be able to do what it needs to do in terms of reindexing and rebuilding my store basically. And then I am going to open up the store on the front end in a sec, but I just want to test this one sort of back end wise, make sure everything runs through, make sure static content deploys and all of that. It's going to bring up errors. If I've got any problems with any of my code in my plugins, it's going to tell me if anything ain't compatible with PHP 8. So we'll just let that run through. So yeah, I mean, this is a bit of insight in and of itself. I mean, people don't really realise what goes into a Magento upgrade or a PHP upgrade. It sounds like really simple stuff, but upgrading PHP isn't always simple. It varies massively from install to install, site to site, depending on what you've got on there. And also something to be aware of is if you're running, say, DigitalOcean boxes with PHP on them and they've got older versions of PHP, even sort of like WordPress sites or any kind of site that uses it, PHP is not exactly the difficult thing to upgrade, because it's just a couple of commands in it. Like obviously I'm using Valet, so my commands are simple, Valet user. But still, upgrading PHP on a Ubuntu Linux server is fairly straightforward, and causes almost no downtime for a site, because you sort of would combine it with a deploy. If you know it's going to work, you would deploy everything, change PHP, refresh PHP FPM, refresh Nginx, whatever you have to do, and PHP's done. One thing you will have to look at if you're going from early 7s, maybe 7.1s to 8s, you've also got to look what version of PHP Nginx, if you're running Nginx, is compatible with, because you can't just swap that, you can't just upgrade that. You're going to have to swap that out. So what we would do is we would spin up another box. We would deploy a new box with the new version of probably Ubuntu even on it. You could go even Ubuntu 20, if you say, for example, Ubuntu's got, because all these things need taken into consideration. Right, that's gone through, no bother. All these things need taken into consideration. It'll be simpler and probably less downtime if you transfer everything over to another box, get it all working, and then change your time to TTL on your domain to a very short TTL, like 30 seconds or something, and switch to a new box and arrange that with a client. Because that Nginx change is causes a lot more downtime than a PHP change. So just something to be aware of there. So you need to look at, basically, but before you do a PHP 8 upgrade, you need to look at your version of Nginx. You need to look at your version of Ubuntu, and you need to make a judgment call there of what you're going to be upgrading and when. And also, you might also be thinking, so say you're running a 2.4.3 Magento patched, and you want to upgrade that, you might want to upgrade that to 2.8, you might want to go to 2.4.5 whilst you go into 2.8, because it's ultimately fully compatible with 8. Well, we're going to find out if it is, but I'm sure it is going to be. So you might want to factor that in as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to these upgrades. It's not just as simple as bobbing to PHP 8 on a set, changing the setting in Plesk, or setting in a patch cPanel or something like that. Or even, if you're doing it actually on your Ubuntu box with command line. So it's not as simple as that. So there's things to consider there with regards to your upgrade procedure and process. Right, and so now what I'm going to do is, so I know that it's going to deploy all right. One thing I want to make sure of is that the command I'm missing, or I ain't tested that yet, is composer install. So I'm going to test that, and the way I test that locally is by removing the contents of the vendor folder and basically simulating, I think I might not need to, and basically simulating the deploy process that I would have on a server. So because I deploy to a new release each time, you know, like a zero downtime deploy concept. Well, it's not fully zero downtime, but each time my Magento's build, it runs Composer, then it runs, you know, versions of the big four, it switches user inis around and all that type of stuff. But basically, I'm deploying to a brand new release every time, so I've got to test it locally on a brand new folder. So I'm going to run Composer install on my vendor folder. And there we go. This is it, right? So this is why I test it. So I'm getting a few issues now. Getting a few issues, and this might be because I tried to run Composer update. Yeah, so the version that I'm testing it on here, 8.024, doesn't satisfy doesn't satisfy these requirements, and these are Magento. There's like loads of them, loads of shit going on here, isn't they? So obviously, I'm doing this on the fly, and I'm not the man with all the answers, but we're going to have a stab at it. We're going to have a stab at it for the next sort of 5 or 10 minutes. But really, this is of the stream that's left. So really, this is like, yeah, this is going to be tough to resolve. But let's try. So first of all, I'm going to run Composer update and see what that gives me. I wonder why 8 doesn't satisfy. I wonder why. So this one, this is a plugin, and it's saying that it doesn't satisfy. See, I'm shit at reading these. That 8 ain't gonna work, ain't gonna cut it. And this one, 8.1. But I had that as sort of an either or and anything in between, but maybe not. Maybe I'm gonna have to go to 8.1. And I might save that for next week's live stream to get 8.1 working, because I'm going to have to install a load of packages. But this is it. So this was a sort of the point of what I wanted to sort of cover in this live stream. Was it's not as simple as just getting things up and running on 8. It isn't just as simple as that. There's going to be a lot more work involved, and there's going to be a lot of debugging. And I'm going to come back to this next week when I'm a lot more informed, because I'm going to be doing this for a week. And I'm going to come back to it, and I'm going to give you as much information as I can gather over the next week on how to repair these types of things, or what, you know, how you need to sort of approach it to be able to get your Magento up and running on PHP 8, ready for next month. So obviously, you know, these things are in stages, and if you was waiting for me to come up with all the answers, I've not got them this week, but I've got, at least, I tell you what, get to the same point I am. Get to the point where you're testing it locally and you are debugging, because these issues that have come up for me, obviously, there's some of them have come up because of the extensions I've got, and just make sure that there's nothing in here. This is saying 2.4.4, but I'm sure this is running 2.4.5. Yes, it is. Yeah, so I'm gonna work this through throughout the week, and I'm gonna come back to you next week with, you know, a bit more insight. So yeah, I only had 40 minutes for this this live stream. I hope that was enjoyable for the people that tuned in, and the people that have tuned in, you know, in the future. If I'm speaking to the people in the future now, the people in the future now, and yeah, another live stream that I think has been. Well, it's been fun for me. I hope it's been useful for you. Please like and subscribe my content. Have a look at the other content I've got on my channel. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much. See you soon.